Hello, everybody. I am Mrs. Poppet, and this is my place. I'm so glad you came back for another part of our story, The Snow Queen. Today we're going to read part 4. It's called The Princess and the Prince, the 4th story. Gerda was obliged to rest again, and just opposite the place where she sat, she saw a great crow come hopping in the snow towards her. He was looking at her for some time. Then he wagged his head and said, "Caw, caw! Good day, good day!" He pronounced the words as plainly as he could because he meant to be kind to the little girl, and then he asked her what she was doing all alone in the big wide world. The word alone Gerda understood very well, and she knew how much it expressed. So she then told the crow the whole story of her life and her adventures, and asked him if he had seen little Kay. The crow nodded his head very gravely and said, "Perhaps I have. It may be." "No, do you think you have?" cried little Gerda, and she kissed the crow and hugged him almost to death with joy. "Gently, gently," said the crow. "I believe I know. I think I may be little Kay, but he has certainly forgotten you by this time for the princess." "Does he live with the princess?" asked little Gerda. "Yes, listen. But it's so difficult to speak your language. If you understood the crow's language, then I can explain it better. Do you?" "No, I have never learned it," said Gerda, "but my grandmother understands it and used to speak it to me. I wish I had learned it." "It does not matter," answered the crow. "I will speak as well as I can, although it will be very badly done." And he told her what he had heard. "In this kingdom where we are now," he said, "there lives a princess who was so wonderfully clever that she had read all the newspapers in the whole world and forgotten them too, although she's so clever. A short time ago she was sitting on her throne, which people say is not such an agreeable seat as is often supposed, and she began to sing a song which commences in these words: 'Why should I not be married? Why not indeed?' said she. And so she determined to marry, if she could find a husband who knew what to say when he was spoken to, and not one who would only look grand, for that was so tiresome. Then she assembled all her court ladies together at the beat of a drum, and when they heard of her intentions they were very pleased. "Oh, we are so glad to hear it," they said. "We were talking about it ourselves the other day." "You may believe every word that I tell you is true," said the crow, "for I have a tame sweetheart who goes freely about the palace, and she told me all of this." Of course his sweetheart was a crow, for birds of a feather flock together, and one crow always chooses another crow. Newspapers were published immediately, with borders of hearts and the initials of the princess among them. They gave notice to every young man who was handsome was free to visit the castle and speak with the princess, and those who could reply loudly enough to be heard when spoken to were to make themselves quite at home at the palace, but the one who spoke best would be chosen as a husband for the princess. "Yes, yes, you may believe me. It's all true as I sit here," said the crow. "The people came in crowds. There was a great deal of crushing and running about, but no one succeeded either on the first or the second day. They could all speak very well when they were outside in the streets, but when they entered the palace gates and saw the guards in the silver uniforms and the footmen in their golden livery on the staircase and great halls lit up, they became quite confused, and when they stood before the throne on which the princess sat, they could do nothing but repeat the last words she had said, and she had no particular wish to hear her own words again. It was just as if they had all taken something to make themselves sleepy while they were in the palace, for they did not recover themselves nor speak till they got back into the street. There was quite a long line of them reaching from the town gate to the palace. I went myself to see them," said the crow. "They were hungry and thirsty, for at the palace they did not even get a glass of water. Some of the wisest had taken a few slices of bread and butter with them, but they did not share it with their neighbors. They thought if they went in with the princess looking hungry, there would be a better chance for themselves. "But Kay, tell me about little Kay," asked Gerda. "Was he among the crowd?" "Wait a bit, we are just coming to him. It was on the third day, when there came marching cheerfully along to the palace a little personage, without horses or carriage, his eyes sparkling like yours. He had beautiful long hair, but his clothes were very poor." "That was Kay," said Gerda joyfully. "Oh, I have found him," and she clapped her hands. He had a little knapsack on his back," added the crow. "No, it must have been his sled," said Gerda, "for he went away with it." "It may have been so," said the crow. "I did not look at it very closely. But I know from my tame sweetheart that he passed through the palace gates, saw the guards in their silver uniforms and the servants in their liveries of gold on the stairs, but he was not the least embarrassed." "It must be very tiresome to stand on these stairs," he said. "I prefer to go in." In the room were blazing with light. Counselors and ambassadors walked with bare feet, carrying golden vessels. It was enough to make anyone feel serious. His boots creaked loudly as he walked, yet he was not uneasy at all. "It must be Kay," said Gerda. "I know he had on new boots. I've heard them creak in his grandmother's room." "They really did creak," said the crow. Yet he boldly went up to the princess herself, who was sitting on a pearl as large as a spinning wheel. And all the ladies of the court were present with their maids, and all the cavaliers with their servants, and each of the maids had another maid to wait on her, and the cavalier servants had their own servants, as well as a page each. They all stood in a circle around the princess, and the nearer they stood to the door, the prouder they looked. The servants' pages, who always wore slippers, could hardly be looked at. They held themselves up so proudly by the door. "It must have been quite awful," said little Gerda. "But did Kay win the princess?" "If I had not been a crow," he said, "I would have married her myself, although I'm engaged. He spoke just as well as I do when I speak the crow's language. So I heard from my tame sweetheart. He was quite free and agreeable, and said he had not come to woo the princess, but to hear her wisdom. And he was as pleased with her as she was with him." "Oh, certainly that was Kay," said Gerda. "He was so clever. He could work mental arithmetic and fractions. Oh, will you take me to the palace?" "It is very easy to ask that," replied the crow. "But how are we to manage it? However, I will speak about it to my tame sweetheart, and ask her advice, for I must tell you it would be very difficult to gain permission for a girl like you to enter the palace." "Oh, yes, but I shall gain permission easily," said Gerda, "for when Kay hears that I'm here, he will come out and fetch me immediately." "Wait here for me by the palings," said the crow, wagging his head as he flew away. It was late in the evening before the crow returned. "Caw, caw," he said. "She sends you a greeting, and here it is, a little roll which she took from the kitchen for you. There's plenty of bread there, and she thinks you must be hungry. It's not possible for you to enter the palace by the front gate. It's not possible because the guards in silver uniform and the servants in gold livery would not allow it. But do not cry. We will manage to get you in. My sweetheart knows a little back staircase that leads to the sleeping apartments, and she knows where to find the key." Then they went into the garden through the great avenue where the leaves were falling one after another, and they could see the light in the palace being put out in the same manner. And the crow led little Gerda to the back door, which stood ajar. Oh, how little Gerda's heart beat with anxiety and longing. It was just as if she was going to do something wrong, yet she only wanted to know where little Kay was. It must be he, she thought, with those clear eyes and that long hair. She could fancy she saw him smiling at her, as he used to at home when they sat among the roses. He would certainly be glad to see her, and hear what a long distance she had come for his sake, and to know how sorry they had been at home because he did not come back. Oh, what a joy yet fear she felt! They were now on the stairs, and in the small closet at the top a lamp was burning. In the middle of the floor stood the tame crow, turning her head from side to side and gazing at Gerda, who curtsied as her grandmother had taught her to do. "My betrothed has spoken so highly of you, little lady," said the tame crow. "Your life history, vita, as it may called, is very touching. If you will take the lamp, I will walk before you. We will go straight this way, and then we shall meet no one." "It seems to me as if somebody were behind us," said Gerda, as something rushed by her like a shadow on the wall, and then horses with flying manes and thin legs, and hunters, ladies, gentlemen on horseback glided by her like shadows on the wall. "They are only dreams," said the crow. "They come to fetch the thoughts of the great people hunting." "All the better, for we shall be able to look in them in their beds more safely. I hope when you rise to honor and favor you will show a grateful heart." "You may be quite sure of that," said the crow from the forest. They now came up to the first hall, the walls of which were hung with rose-colored satin, embroidered with artificial flowers. Here the dreams again flitted by them, but so quickly that Gerda could not distinguish the royal persons. Each hall had appeared more splendid than the last. It was enough to bewilder anyone. At length they reached a bedroom. The ceiling was like a great palm tree, with glass leaves of the most costly crystal, and over the center of the floor 2 beds each, resembling a lily, hung from the stem of gold. In one the princess was white, and the other was red, and in this Gerda had to seek for little Kay. She pushed one of the red leaves aside and saw a little brown neck. "Oh, that must be Kay!" She called his name quite loudly and held the lamp over him. He awoke and turned his head around, and it was not little Kay. The prince was only like him in the neck, yet he was still young and pretty. Then the princess peeped out of her white lily bed and asked what was the matter. Then little Gerda wept and told her story and all that the crows had done to help her. "You poor child," said the princess, and they praised the crows and said they were not angry for what they had done, but that it must not happen again, and this time they should be rewarded. "Would you like to have your freedom?" asked the princess, "or would you prefer to be raised to the position of court crows, with all that is left in the kitchen for yourselves?" Then both crows bowed and begged to have fixed appointments, for they thought of their old age and said it would be comfortable to feel that they had provision for in their old age, as they called it. And then the prince got out of his bed, gave it up to Gerda. He could do no more, and she lay down. She folded her hands and thought, "How good everybody is to me, men and animals too." Then she closed her eyes and fell into a sweet sleep. All the dreams came flying back again to her, and they looked like angels. One of them drew a little sled on which sat Kay, and he nodded to her. But all this was only a dream, and it vanished as soon as she woke. The following day she was dressed from head to toe in silk and velvet, and they invited her to stay at the palace for a few days and enjoy herself, but she only begged for a pair of boots and a little carriage, and a horse to draw it, so that she might go into the wide world to seek Kay. And she obtained not only boots, but also a muff, and she was neatly dressed, and when she was ready to go, there at the door she found a coach made of pure gold, with the coat of arms of the prince and princess shining upon it like a star, and a coachman and a footman and outriders all wearing golden crowns on their heads. The prince and princess themselves helped her into the coach, and wished her success. The forest crow, who was now married, accompanied her for the first 3 miles. He sat by Gerda's side, as he could not bear riding backwards. The tame crow stood in the doorway, flapping her wings. She could not go with them because she had been suffering from a headache ever since their new appointment, no doubt from eating too much. The coach was well stored with sweet cakes, and under the seat were fruit and gingerbread nuts. "Farewell, farewell!" cried the princess and the prince. Little Gerda wept, and the crow wept, and then after a few miles the crow also said, "Farewell!" And this was the saddest parting of all. However, he flew to a tree and stood flapping his wings as long as he could see the coach, which glittered in the bright sunshine. Her adventures just keep going on, don't they? Do you think she's ever going to find Kay? Well, we'll find out pretty soon. Come back for the next episode tomorrow. See you then.